Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast of Real Recovery. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Welcome to Real Recovery. So glad you're with us tonight. Bill Arnold on this side of the studio, and just across the way, a man does not that he's got flawed information, but he remembers when Pluto was actually considered a planet. George P. Fraser. Hello, George.
I thought that was Venus. I got it mixed
Pluto.
up.
Pluto.
Okay.
You probably still think Pluto's a planet. It's not.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make that clear.
Well,
People know.
That was good.
Yeah.
They changed that a few years ago.
They did. It's technically a dwarf planet, just so you know. I just want to make sure that...
Can you say dwarf anymore?
Probably not.
It should be a smaller planet. Right? No.
There you go. I know. Why did I bring that up? I don't know.
Well, you prepared. That's why.
Yeah. Because we are into stories of recovery here on Real Recovery, and we love what God's doing in the lives of people, and the transformations are spectacular. So for some people, the problem that is in their life is the size of a planet.
What if, even if you're listening on a dwarf planet?
If you're on a dwarf planet tonight,
yeah,
and it's not as big as you think it might be, you still need Jesus.
Good save. Good save. Hey, we were talking over tonight.
Or today.
In the car on the way over, I was talking to Tony from L.A., who we'll bring on the program later if we run out of interesting material. I think he might be coming on quick.
No, I don't think so, George. We had a rough start. Let's be honest. It was a rough start.
Well, we were in our 11th year, and the first few shows were really rough.
Yeah.
And I was telling Tony about how when we did the first show here, everybody was gone. We did it on Sunday night like we're doing now. And nobody was here. And we went out to eat, and you said, was that a fraternity prank? and we didn't know. And God has shown up. And the big thing about our show, we talk about a step every week, but there's nothing magical out of the steps other than it came out of God's Word, the Bible, with a number on them, to help you walk out your faith. We don't worship at the altar of AA. We worship the highest power, Jesus. But the steps, Billy, help us walk out our faith. And yesterday, I was talking to some guys in recovery, and I got a really good example of that. And I wanted to talk about step 3 tonight, where we talk about turning our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand Him. And people get messed up on that because instead of realizing that we were created in God's image, people that have their own God create God in their image, and it's always an extension of themselves. My God wouldn't do that. My God isn't. You need to go to the source and read the Word to find out about God. And I was talking to this guy, and he said that one of his mentors told him, hey, when you're really anxious, when you're really fearful, you're in the middle of a story. You're in the middle of an opportunity that God is going to fix it in the end. And don't be anxious. And I thought, that is the best. I told the guy, that is the best rendition of Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are walking according to His purpose, is that, Bill, in the end, don't rule God out because you're really struggling. He's got it. His timing is different, and it's going to come out the way He wants it in the end. And when you get too fearful, and gosh, I sure do, the 18th tee shot at Rush Creek, super anxious. Bill, when they cut half my lung out, I remember before I went under, it's actually one of the greater moments in my life when they gave me that stuff before I went out. But I was thinking, I will never again be afraid of the 18th tee shot of Baker. And after 2 years, when I got to play it again, I couldn't even get the club back. So the anxious thing, what I do when I get anxious is I'm holding on to it without letting God into my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do it by my own efforts. And I've used that as like a red flag for me when I get anxious or really fearful of something. George, you're trying to do it yourself. And when we get to step 3, We get out of the decision-making business. We just don't turn over our drinking, our drug use, our gambling to God. We turn over our whole life. And what the scriptural backing that up is John 15:5, where Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing. I forget that, and I think everybody does. And what a great comfort it is when you get really anxious and fearful, and a lot of the stuff is way beyond our capacity mentally and physically. I mean, tonight I didn't even know about Pluto, and now
I know, because you grew up in a different time, right? But I was thinking of Psalm chapter 8, when you read in verse 3, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. What is man that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? So I was thinking of the majesty of all of God's creation, and he cares about each person listening tonight. And he wants you to have a transformed life. He wants you to stop listening to lies. He wants you to come into his truth, and he wants you to receive the abundant blessings and grace that he has prepared for you.
I love that, and that fits so well with this step, that God does care about us, and he does have you. Even when you can't feel it, you think he's not there. Read the Psalms. David had a lot of desert time.
Yes, he did.
Where he couldn't feel anything, and he's always there. I've never known God, Bill, in all my experiences, to not do what he says he's going to do. And there used to be an ad. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and there was an ad in the paper, in the back, all the, the want ads. Mm-hmm. A guy named Ching Johnson was a builder or something, and it said every day, God said it, I believe it.
Really?
And I used to see that every day as a kid and go, oh, that's a nice thought. Mm-hmm. As an adult, it's a good reminder to me, God has it, George. You don't.
Right.
And when I get in trouble is I'm trying to do something I wasn't created to do. If you're out there struggling with drinking and drugging and gambling, and you're walking far away from God and you're not happy and you don't have peace, the reason is you were created by God, who created the universe, to walk out his desires for you, not your desires for him. Mm-hmm. And when you get to step 3 and you're beaten into a state of reasonableness and you're willing to do whatever it takes, you get that. The problem is when we start feeling better, we start negotiating. And the way I do that is, I don't need to do that. I went to church last week. How about Zooming it? That's great. I can have coffee. Bob's there. Mm-hmm. And I've got to make the effort to not do my stuff, but do God's stuff, and pray. Pray for the power to have him take away your selfishness, your self-centeredness. And I always pray, Bill, before I get out of bed, for the power, strength, and desire to stay sober today. And so far, that's worked today.
Yeah. Well, I want to encourage, as a first step, that you would take your story, which, trust me, it might be big in your mind, but it's small in God's economy. Take your small story and place it into God's huge story, and you will be exactly where he wants you. When you think of the heavens and the work of his fingers and the moon and the stars that he has set in place, and you ask, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, and human beings that you care for them? Let's take our troubles, our addictions, our anger, our frustration, our lust, our failures, our mistakes. That's what I call the little story. And let's put them into the huge story. God knew all about Pluto before any scientist came to the conclusion that it wasn't a planet.
I don't think he named it, though.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he would have named it after a Disney character.
Probably not.
Hey, don't you find, though, when you get too anxious and fearful, that we're getting out of God's and trying to handle stuff on our own that we're not created to do?
Yeah, self-survival kicks in real fast, I think. I mean, you always try to scramble to find the next solution that has a more immediate answer. And sometimes God's answer is going to take a little time to unfold.
Well, our guest tonight...
We have a guest?
Yeah, if we run out of time. I was talking to him one time, and I stole this from him, and I use it all the time. People go, oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you. I came up with it. It's actually from Tony. That we give it to God and then go, okay, I'll take it from here. And I do that all the time. Get me out of this, and then we'll go back to cruise control with George F. at the wheel. And what I'm realizing, George F's not supposed to have the wheel. Tony and I were talking about that old bumper sticker. Remember, God is my co-pilot?
Yeah.
And the car always had a big dent on it. You know? and that's really symbolic of what we do. So, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt.
How about I do a little illustration now? Do you have time for that, George?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a story that's stuck in my head from a guy that goes in to get his watch repaired because it's broken. He has it on his wrist, and he comes in and he taps it and says to the watch repairman, he goes, "This thing stopped working. I don't know. I need it fixed." The guy said, "I will absolutely fix it for you." And the guy said, "Thank you." Turns around and walks out the door. Still on his wrist. That's often the way we deal with God. We walk in with our problems and we walk out with them after we have asked him to do something about it, to which he has said, "I will do something about it." And then we leave with the same problem.
I like that. So you figured it out when you got in your car?
Yeah, you still got the watch on.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, George, let's take a little break. I'm looking forward to talking to Tony tonight. He's got a great story. You are listening to Real Recovery with Bill and George. We have Ryan on the board, so we are in good hands. We'll take a break and be right back. Welcome back to the show. You are listening to Real Recovery. Now, I believe in its 11th year, and we couldn't be happier that God has given us this platform, because the stories we hear of transformation in Jesus Christ are so powerful and so real, and we are always inspired by the work that God's doing in the lives of our guests. And George, you have a much better relationship with our guest tonight than I do, seeing as how I just met him 11 minutes ago.
Just met him in the parking lot.
Oh, you okay? So we're both the same place.
Try not to mess this up. We always have an exciting show. Now, Tony's been a friend of mine for several years and a great guy, and glad you were willing to do this. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up and where you grew up and what it was like?
Yeah. I grew up in the 70s in L.A. in one of the suburbs, Whittier, and when I was 2, my dad split. Took off. My brother had just been born, and we went on welfare. Mom had to find a job, and so she eventually did. We rented a house, and it just seemed, it was actually next to a boys' home, and so every once in a while we'd get the police come through the neighborhood and remind us to lock our doors and lock our windows because someone had escaped, but. We it seemed normal, and then at some point my grandfather died. When I was young, and so he sort of left instructions for my grandmother to take us in because we didn't have much money and
So
and
your
stuff.
mom, and did you have any siblings?
My brother, yeah, he had just been born when my dad took off, and so age 7, we moved in with my grandmother, and you didn't really realize it at the time, but my grandmother and mother really didn't get along that well, but. We move in, and that enables us. The beauty of the story of my life, when I look back on it now, is that enabled us to go to church at some point. Because
Grandma?
Yeah, my mom actually realized, the school system here stinks, and we need to get you into a private school, and God used. My dad taking off on us to draw my mom to church, and so she obviously took me and my brother, and so that's where I became saved. But to get into the school, we had to be members of the church, and so my mom became a member. We went to the church or to the school, and and that was great. And so my dad leaving really was in a couple of things was really the thing that drew me to the Lord eventually. But also is a thing that, in some ways, is kind of led to my biggest obstacle in my life, and that is, while again he drew me to himself through that situation. I also, as a kid, you go to school, and one of the first things that they ask in class is, "Hey, what do your parents do?" And my last name starting with a V, I was always the last, one of the last kids. There were actually 2 kids whose last names were in the W's, were right behind me. But I had to sit through all the other kids whose dad was a doctor, an attorney, business person, did this or that, and it'd get to, oh, what does your dad do? I'm like, well, I don't know. You know, he took off when I was 2. We haven't heard from him, so I have no idea what he does. And that,
Ouch.
yeah, and so that, whatever, it felt like an eternity when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. It was probably 10, 15 minutes of waiting, but that period was just, it was horrendous. And you'd get to that point, and then, you know, you, as a kid, you turn bright red, and you're just embarrassed, and so you don't even want that moment to happen. You dread that first day of school. And so you go home and you know a little bit about God, you know a little bit about prayer, and you pray to God, God, where's my dad? You know, bring him, you got to bring him home. And I would cry myself to sleep many nights praying that to happen. And it never happened. Now as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, you don't realize like God's answering this in a different way. You just realize God's not answering this. And so functionally in the back of my mind, yes, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in what he did. I believe in the gospel. But I don't really believe that God really answers prayers. There's something that I'm not doing that's causing him not to listen to my prayers. And so that while I had all these people that I went to church with and in the youth groups at church, and they just seemed to be on fire for the Lord, and I just had this sort of academic relationship with the Lord. It was like, okay, a Bible class is nothing really different than English class, math class, science class. It's just sort of something else to learn. Coupled with that is my mom, for whatever reason in all of this, decided, and this isn't just my perception, but my aunts actually one of my aunts actually addressed this problem with my mom, was that my mom decided to pour all of her energy and attention into my brother and sort of let me raise myself. And so I became very self-reliant. So I now have I have a God that seemingly doesn't answer my prayers, so I'm on my own there. I have a mom that sort of said, well, you know, you get good grades, you know, school seems to come easy. It's not for your brother as well. And so she let me do that. And so I just became very self-reliant, you know, at a very young age. So I took care of all the school projects. You know, if I got, you know, you problems with the homework, you just figure out how to get it done, right? And so you just do that kind of stuff. And, you know, I get to baseball practice, ride my bike over to baseball practice, you know, play baseball games, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that feels normal. But my aunt addressed that with my mom. My mom denied that was an issue. And it really showed up in a couple of areas. One, when I went to junior high, played varsity baseball, basketball, football, she didn't go to a single game. And in fact, when practice was over, I'd walk 2 miles. It's probably why I hate fast food to this day. But I would walk 2 miles to Del Taco. I still remember it. It's no longer in existence. But I go to Del Taco, sit there, get a Coke and fries, and do my homework for 2 hours till she'd pick me up. And never really asked about homework, never asked about the games, practice, anything like that. It was just sort of like, okay, I have to pick you up. Sometimes my grandmother would come pick me up. As a result, my grandmother and I became very close, much closer than my mom and me. And then in high school, that same thing happened. I went to a public high school away from the private school, and when I went to school at the very beginning, I took care of all my own paperwork. Actually, signed my mom's name to it, which wasn't good later on when I was ditching school and starting to drink and party, because then I could sign my mom's name to all my absence slips. But I didn't realize that at the time. But even then, I wrestled in high school. She didn't come to a single match. Later on, after I started, we can get into this, but I started partying in high school and all that. And then when I stopped partying, I went to college. I took out some loans to get to college and go through that. And she wouldn't help pay for it, but she actually did help pay for my brother to go to college, which was another interesting thing in our relationship. And then later on, after graduating and realizing, like, graduating from college and realizing, hey, I've got to, I want to go work for I had a degree in accounting, and so I wanted to go work for a big firm. I knew I had to go to grad school coming out of a small school, so I came here to Minnesota to get a master's in tax, and then went to work for Deloitte. And in this time, then my mom turned around and gave her house, really her only real asset, to my brother. Just handed the keys to the house, turned the deed over to him. And I found out through mutual friends of ours who told me. And that sort of kicked off then and just an even more fractured relationship with her. And I started to go back to drinking at that point in the story. And then, drinking too much, met a wonderful woman in this particular period of time after I'd quit Deloitte and decided that, going into the wine business would be a good idea.
Let's hold up here.
Yeah,
I got a bunch of questions. It's
fascinating story, Tony. Oh, my.
So you started using in high school.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a guess with things at the house. You really didn't have a model for building relationships. Was that hard for you? Did you have a hard time trusting people?
Yeah. I was first of all, I was extremely shy. And which, so for instance, like my brother and I didn't get along that well, but if we went to the grocery store together, the little corner market to buy candy or something, I would give him the money to pay for it because I couldn't go to the counter. And so, I didn't have very many close friends. I had, I was one of those kids that could float between a lot of groups, but had no close lasting friends. Yeah.
So how old were you when you started using?
16.
Okay. Drinking, pot?
Drinking, then pot shortly after. And
did you have some friends then? Did you hang out with the users a little bit?
Actually, it was from the Christian school. My best friend Rich, aged second grade. We met in second grade. Best friends since then. His parents got divorced. It ended up being kind of a theme. Like even with girlfriends in high school, like his mom would take off and leave us the house for the weekend. I had girlfriends, same thing, like their moms would take off, leave the house for the weekend, and we would throw these parties at their house, and and it was easy to ditch school or parts of school just to go over there and hang out, listen to music, watch TV, smoke pot, drink, you name it.
Unrestricted, it sounds like.
Well, he raised himself.
I know, but there's no eyes on him, especially on these weekends.
Yeah, there was no supervision until I would get in trouble, which was also part of the deal. Like when I knew there were times where things were out of control, and it was almost like this subconscious sabotaging of myself to get in trouble because I knew if I got in trouble, I'd get attention. And my mom would show up at that point.
It's very interesting. One way to get attention. Yeah.
That's not why I did it. Just got in trouble. Yeah, it's interesting. When we come back, Bill, we're going to there's some interesting things here that he's partying, he gets new friends, but then he had to reel it back in to get done what he needed to do for his career.
And before that, George and Tony, what I heard is I didn't have a good close friend, and how incredibly valuable it is to have a friend that you can just sort of hang with and live life with and say everything to and do everything with, and you're playing the rooms, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure. You become a chameleon.
Yeah. All right. We're taking a little break. You're listening to Real Recovery with Bill and George. Our special guest, Tony, is here with us tonight in studio, and we are going to take a very short break, and then I promise we'll be back. See, that didn't take long. We are already back. You're listening to Real Recovery, Bill and George, and we've got Tony with us tonight in studio. George, so far, I am captivated by this story. It's got so many layers to it, and I know you got a follow-up question for Tony.
Yeah, Tony, so you started partying a little bit in high school and hanging out with a girl whose mom was gone all the time and partying. And how did you reel that back in to go to college and get through that?
Yeah, so I was pretty out of control by the end of high school, although it's like the Lord kept a couple of breaks around me. So even just my junior and senior years of high school, I knew I could miss, I think it was 70 days of school of each class, right, without failing. And so I somehow had this intrinsic knowledge of like, okay, I've missed 68 days of this one particular class. I can't miss anymore. And so I would show up. High or not, I'd show up. And so I graduated. But then Rich and I, my friend, we go to this junior college. Well, actually, we went to Cal State Fullerton first. It was a disaster. Neither one of us were ready for college. Decided to just drop out. But I also knew in the back of my mind, it was like the Lord kind of kept this plant there, like, do not give up on school. And so I knew that if I quit going altogether, I would probably stop going and just go do something else. And so we were plodding along, taking classes at a junior college, 1 or 2 classes a semester, working part-time in retail. And finally, the kicker was that Rich and I were starting to go our separate ways. He was getting deeper into doing coke and now starting to do crystal meth, and I just didn't want any part of that. And I went to a party that his sister was throwing. She had a kid. The kid was about a year old. I think I was 20, and so his sister was 19. Kid's about a year old. I go over to this party. I'm watching them all do crystal meth, and I decide to go get a beer out of the fridge. The kid, they say, no, Tony, don't go get it. Watch this. So they tell the kid to go get a beer out of the fridge, right? Kid's 1 year old, barely walking. They think this is the greatest thing ever. This kid can go to the fridge, open the door, and of all the things in the fridge, pick out a beer and hand it to me. And they're laughing. Great. Oh, isn't that so cool? And it was like the Holy Spirit convicted me in that moment. It's like, do you see how disgusting this whole thing is and what your life is really looking like? You're getting a good glimpse of it. Like, they think this wickedness is really funny. So I went out in the backyard. I started to drink the beer. I put it down and snuck out the back door. Sad part of that story, that was the last time I saw Rich. I don't know what happened to him to this day. I never called him, never followed up with him. We were inseparable from second grade to age 20, and I just walked out of that backyard. But after that, I started to realize, like, I'm not going anywhere in this life if I don't, use the brain that God gave me. And so it was like the switch flipped, and I stopped drinking, stopped smoking pot, went to school full time, got in this point too, I had used this point to like learn how to play golf and teach myself how to play golf. And I was racing mountain bikes. And
were you going to church?
Yeah, I started going back to church. I was going to Chuck Swindoll's church, EV Free in Fullerton.
Oh, cool.
And that was great church. And then I went to Whittier Area Baptist Fellowship for a while, and then was in a group being mentored by some older guys in the group, and that was really cool. But I went to college, did that full time, took all classes that I could, played golf on the college golf team there, and then got an accounting degree. So it was a small school outside of L.A., and I knew I wasn't going to get recruited by any big accounting firm because, they had their choice of people out of USC, UCLA, Northridge, and some of the really good accounting schools around there, Fullerton. And so I just knew if I wanted to get a job with a bigger firm, then I needed to go to grad school. And so, the guys that were in that men's fellowship at Whittier Area Baptist helped me make that decision, help me study for it, help me to get to the University of Minnesota to work on a master's in tax.
How many years does that take?
It's like a year and a half.
Okay, so you moved to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Were you going to church? And
I was until I came here to Minnesota, and then I didn't really get involved in a church. I just went to school, and you've said this in the groups that I've been in with you. You said relapse is a process, and in some ways a relapse started in that process, right? Because God brought me to this point, and it was like, well, I've got this from here, right?
That's your trademark.
My quote. Yeah. It's like I should actually be in the back seat while God's driving, right? But I want to get in the driver's seat and then, ask Jesus to get in the passenger seat and then ask for directions occasionally when I get lost. And this is exactly what happened. I'm like, I get the job at Deloitte. I go there, I work there for 6 years. Everything is great. I'm doing really well.
Were you drinking at all?
Not initially, and then then at some point though, it's that culture of working hard, playing hard, right? And so I
deserve this.
Yeah, I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes. I'm traveling a ton. they party. I mean, they encourage, at the time they encouraged it. I mean, you could go to the Christmas party and there was unlimited alcohol, and they'd give you, a cab, and there's no Uber back then, but cab receipts to send you home. You went to national training once a year for a week, and every night was open bar. They'd take groups out drinking later on after the open bar. So it was really a culture of just you work hard, you play hard, and you got rewarded financially. You
had to think you hit the big time, because you did.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting in meetings with, the CEOs, CFOs of Fortune 500 companies, with partners from, Big Four accounting firms. I mean, it's pretty exciting stuff. I'm traveling, 200 nights a year, and an unlimited expense account and all kinds of stuff. So you're eating in the best restaurants across the country, and you're just talking about some kid that grew up on welfare,
So were you happy?
I was, and I was still racing bikes on the weekends. Like when I'd come home, I was happy for a while, but then, there was a point in time where, I mentioned, I think before we went to the break, it was like being a chameleon, right? At some point you start to look around and you compare yourself and you're just like, wow, that person has a law degree. That person, they didn't go to that small school outside LA. They went to USC or Notre Dame or BYU, another big accounting school. And you start to say, I'm a fraud. Like, I don't really belong here, and even though you're getting good reviews every year, you're getting really good raises, you're getting promoted on kind of a faster track. And I still looking at that and going, I don't really belong here. Like, I do feel like a fraud. And the drinking started to pick up. I had also gotten married in here, and that didn't last long. And so the relationship part of it, too, is like I'm traveling 200 nights a year, so I'm never home. So what friends I had at this point had dropped off because I'm just never around.
Did you meet her in church?
No. She rode bikes, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, trying to fill in the blanks, Bill. and it sounds like from an outsider, everything should be good. Sounds like you're kind of slowly dying on the installment plan, a little more every day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm disconnected from the Lord. I'm completely dependent on myself. I don't have any close friends. I'm not close with my mom or anybody in my family. And I'm looking for love. I think I find it in somebody who's as flawed as I am. And, and I know that going into it, and I ignored all the warning signs, ignored the fact that she wasn't a believer. And, within a year of being married, she was cheating on me. And, now this is getting toward the end of my career at Deloitte. And, so I've got her cheating on me, getting divorced. I found out that my mom is, given the house over to my brother. And now I'm just disconnected from everybody. And I'm starting to drink more and more. And I'm doing it under the guise of, I'm collecting wine. This is a rich man's beverage, and it's so sophisticated and all this great stuff. And so that's when I make the decision to go into the wine business and become an assistant winemaker, take what money I had at the time and pour it into starting my own wine label and doing all of that.
Wow. Bill, can you see kind of the abandonment complex here? Everywhere he turns, people leave.
Well, I'm hearing betrayal. I'm hearing disappointment. I'm hearing resentment, anger. That seems to be quite the recipe for time to self-medicate.
Yeah, and if I'm not abandoned, then I'm going to abandon first.
Right, yeah. You're going to go on the offensive.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So I'm curious as to the next place where you're hitting bottom, and how does Jesus pull you out of this?
Yeah. So I go into the wine business and meet another woman. She professes to be a believer. We start dating, and I start drinking out of control within a couple of years of being in that business, and kind of rock bottom, if you will use that term. I like with the story of the prodigal son, it's like he did not return to his father when he was hungry. He returned to his father when he was starving. And I think the Lord brought me to a place where I was starving at the time. I basically wasn't working. I was just taking every dime I had and just drinking every day. And it was out of control. And girlfriend, then fiance, then wife, now ex-wife at the time, but she just didn't know what to do. And eventually she found a recovery place down in Santa Barbara, California, about 10 years ago. And I went there, spent about 8.5 months in that program. And that's where I really found the Lord again. I just started to turn, it was a step-based program, but the Lord used that again to just say, here I am, where's that dependence on me? Where's the gratitude for everything that I've done in your life? And I started to see that and just pray about it. When I came back from that place, I spent 8 months in the program, graduated, then stayed another 10 managing the facility and the guys in the program. And when I came back up with my ex-wife to Oakland, where we lived, we made a point of going back to church. So I found a church, really good church out there in Walnut Creek, and we got into a small group from there, and just things seemed to be really going well. I was getting back into the Word, prayer, devotions. We were again doing things at church and volunteering, and just life was good. I had a job back at a small CPA firm, little family firm in San Francisco, and just it was just going really well. And then again, the process, right? Relapse is a process. And so we decide after a series of things to move to Austin, where her family was from. And we just realized the Bay Area was just, to us, it was getting out of control. I was working in San Francisco and all the problems that are going on there. So we decided to move to Austin. And when we did, I made the horrible decision that when we got to Austin, we didn't need to find a church right away. That I was going to race bicycles, and then we'd find a church after I kind of got that out of the way.
But at the time, that seemed
like a great idea, And so I did that for about 9 months before we got into church, but the process had really started at that point.
Okay, so how long did you stay sober before you picked up?
So it was a total of 6 years. When I left that first treatment place in 20, so I went in there fall of 2013 to 2014. Well, I left in early 2015, but it was 6 years of sobriety, and then like a series of things. Right, I put off my dependency on God, even though I got us into found a really good church, really good church. That time frame kind of started that process, and then the series of things. We went on this cruise for 14 days with her family, and there was a lot of drinking going on with her and her family. And for the first time, I really started to miss it. And I didn't have anybody to really, that was close to, that I could say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with.
So you had no accountability groups, no Bible studies, just kind of winging it.
Yeah.
Well, relapse is a process by which we return to chemical use. We walk away from God. We stop doing the non-negotiables. And the next thing we know, we're back at it again. And Satan roars around like a lion looking for somebody to devour.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we're taking a little break. You're listening to Real Recovery with Bill and George, and we've got Tony as our guest. And you can listen to Faith Radio live, or you can just check out the podcast. It doesn't matter where you go. You can download if you've got that Faith Radio app. So give it a try. And if you don't like it, it's easy just to delete it off your phone, but I'm pretty sure you'll keep it. Fascinating story. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Real Recovery. If you missed any of tonight's story, I really recommend going and hearing it from the start. You can always do that at myfaithradio.com. Go to the Real Recovery show page, and if you want to listen to other episodes, they're all there waiting for you. All right, George, let's take it from here.
Or go back to where he totally blew everything up in his life. So what did you do then?
So from that point, my ex-wife was a flight attendant, and so she'd be gone for several days at a time. And in one of those episodes, she was gone. We were in a new city, no close friends, a lot of anonymity. I'm working hard at another CPA firm, and it became very easy one night to be like, well, this will make the night go by faster. This will make it a little bit better. And I think, after 6 years, I can control it. Well, I started drinking, and within 4 or 5 months, it was starting to get bad enough that she started to really pick up on it. And we were starting to get more involved at the church, and so they decided, hey, you probably need to go get some help. Well, I convinced them that I could fix myself, and so they decided to kind of let that go for another few months, actually about 9, and which I proved that I couldn't fix it over that 9 months. And so that led me to Redemption House, recommended by our counselor down at our church down in Austin.
Now, that's a biblical-based Christian rehab.
Correct. So I came up here from Austin, primarily to get my relationship right with God, to walk out this repentance, but also, let's face it, like save my marriage and all of those sorts of things, right? Because I couldn't if she leaves, then I'm left with no one. And so I did the program 3 months, go home to Austin, and I'll take a lot of the blame, but I also, there's some other issues that were going on, and I got home and really just said, I can take my foot off the gas. So all the hard work I was doing when I left, when I was at Redemption House the first time, I can take my foot off the gas, kind of coast for a couple weeks. It's Christmas. It's, nobody's going to be hiring anyways over Christmas. I'll look for a job after the first of the year. So made all these just horrendous decisions. She also decided, for whatever reason, to leave alcohol in the house and then, take off on another trip for work. And so, I find some bottles of alcohol up in the cabinets and decide to go for it, and which turned into almost 2 straight weeks of drinking. She's like, nope, that's it. Like, I'm calling the cops if you don't get out of here. I'm going to have you thrown out. I'm filing for divorce, all that kind of stuff. So John at Redemption House, great, love John. He says, come back, just come back and we'll help you figure it out. So I get back there, a month after leaving. I mean, it's just, it's sort of humiliating to have to go back, but you realize you have to, because there's no other options at this point. And so, I go back. There's some uncertainty while I'm there, whether or not she's going to file for divorce. She eventually does, has papers served. But, in this moment, like, the Lord is just, I go back to the beginning of my story, like that extreme self-reliance. The Lord is basically trying to beat me over the head and say, like, are you ready to give up and surrender your will? Step 3, right, to me. And, I was like, yep, I'm ready this time, and I'm crying out to God for relief, like David lamenting, just what is going on? I don't get this. Why is she filing for divorce? Like, why is this happening? Why is this allowed to happen? This untrust in God's goodness and all this kind of stuff just pouring out. And then, it is that, like, all of a sudden things start to pick up, right? Okay, she's filing for divorce. My church wants me to come back to Austin. They want to do all these things. I get a job offer with a CPA firm, and then, George was pointing out to me before, it's like, they wanted me to go into a sober living when I went back to Austin, so I wasn't living by myself. I said, sure, I'll do that. Meanwhile, I had gotten myself an apartment by myself and, had no plans to go to a sober living. And so I get back to Austin and, do okay for a little bit, but I'm alone. I realized, like, this is a mistake. I mean, I knew it when I got there. I'm working, got a good job, but I have no family. I have no friends, and things just go bad quickly.
So what did you do?
So, same thing. I get back to Redemption House this time and just start talking to Justin and being like, yeah, Justin's the counselor there. He's the program manager, developer. So I just start telling him, like, I don't know what to do at this point, and the Lord says, I walked out of there at one point. And with the goal of walking to Minneapolis in the middle of winter to a homeless shelter because I couldn't fix myself anymore. I was trying to kill sin. I had a list of at least 200 sins that I needed to kill in my life, and I couldn't kill, like, even seemingly easy ones. And so I was so frustrated, like, well, clearly God is not operating in my life. I can't kill these sins, not even seemingly easy ones, so he's not answering those prayers. What am I doing in a Christian place? My third time, it clearly didn't work. It's time to just go to a homeless shelter, like in Minneapolis. But I know underlying that it was really cold, sub-zero, was maybe I'll freeze to death on the way over there. So I walked from, Minnetrista to Wayzata, which is like 13 miles, and got there and hung out, and then the Lord convicted me to walk back and just humble myself and walk back. But strangely enough, I'd been reading the story of Abraham and wrestling with Jacob and Jacob's hip being touched and his socket being thrown out. Well, on the walk back, my hip started hurting, and I could walk about a mile at a time before I had to sit down for 15 minutes. But I eventually, after 10 hours, walked back and got to Minnetrista.
So you came back.
Yep.
You graduated.
Yep.
And what did you do different this time that led you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's just being honest about everything. It is turning my will over to God and saying, God, I'm going to wait on you. I'm going to trust you. I know that you are good. I can't fix myself. 2 Corinthians 3:18 has sort of become such an important verse in my life that I'm transformed by beholding the glory of the Lord. It's not all of the efforts that I do. I can't transform myself. That's what God does. And that was an amazing realization, along with Romans 8:1, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Therefore, there's
yes,
no
yes.
Yeah. So you graduated, and that was close to a year ago. Close?
No. Graduation was back in, April or so.
Okay.
And then became the house manager there at Redemption House. So I'm staying, working with the guys, helping Justin with groups, driving the guys, all that kind of stuff.
So you got about 9 months sobriety.
Yep.
And you're doing the deal. You're going to accountability groups. You joined a church.
Yep.
And you're working with other guys, Bill. That's the recipe to do it. Are you praying for your sobriety every day?
Yeah, I get up every morning and, get up at 4:30 to 5 a.m., spend a couple hours. We have that luxury there. Spend a couple hours in devotions and prayer and just, pray for grace to get through the day, to walk humbly with God, to honor him in everything that I do. That's my version of that prayer about being sober, is just, I want to walk humbly with God every day and depend on him, and then be made more into the image of Christ, no matter the discomfort to myself.
Great story.
That's a great story.
We're going to need an update in a year.
Yeah.
But I really like what you shared, and I like what I'm seeing, because when we look at people and go, okay, how you doing, Tony? The better question is, what are you doing, Tony? And Bill, when we work with guys, and I know in my own walk, what am I doing? Not what I'm saying, not what I'm thinking, but what am I doing? And you're checking all the boxes. Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm very happy. Yeah.
Full of joy, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Question, Tony,
Yeah.
what do you think of George's outfit? Go ahead.
I'll just say it's better than the outfit he was wearing yesterday when I went over to his house.
I was just trying to figure out if he was still having trouble with honesty. That was just a little pop quiz.
You'd ask a guy wearing a baseball cap? Yeah.
An L.A. baseball cap, and he actually earned that because he's from L.A. So.
Yeah.
Dodgers are cool.
Yeah, I'm a huge Dodger fan.
Yeah.
Although they've had their problems recently.
they have.
Anyway.
Great job.
Yeah, great story. Really amazed at what God's doing in your life and what your future ahead of you has in terms of helping others and expanding the kingdom. That's a great story. All right, George, I think that's it for Real Recovery this week. Another award-winning episode.
Good to see you tonight, Bill.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for joining us tonight. And again, if you are just a new listener to Real Recovery, where have you been? You can head over to myfaithradio.com. Check out our webpage and have a great week. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.